When people talk about the history of government, most people immediately think of our founding fathers, the Declaration of Independence, and all the fun stuff we learned about in Helton's and Harlob's American history classes. While this is all interesting and important fodder, the truth about our government systems is that they go way back, all the way thousands of years. It turns out that people much older than us figured this stuff out a long time ago. One of the best ancient examples of the rule of law is something called the Code of Hammurabi. It was a set of rules written on a special rock called a stele in ancient Babylon. Actually written as 282 pieces, the basic gist of everything can be expressed with the modern phrase, an eye for an eye. If you do wrong, wrong shall be done to you. Now this might sound primitive, but this was not only the first time rules had even been written down, but it was actually the historical basis for many of the important documents like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and it happened almost 4,000 years ago. Since then, we've had many other examples of historical documents that were significant. There's the Magna Carta, the Mayflower Compact, even the English Bill of Rights that have all played a part in the creation of our modern government.
Prior to becoming the United States, America was 13 colonies under British control. Over time, the actions of England created division between the two sides. These actions included new taxes, colonies could only trade with Britain, taking away juries and appointing judges, and housing troops without consent in people's homes. The overall problem was that the colonists had no representatives in Parliament, and these actions were only dealing with the colonies, a very unfair situation, not having any say but still having to follow it. After trying and failing to work with Britain to fix these issues, the colonies decided they could not work with England any longer, so they drafted the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Many notable Americans were part of this, with Thomas Jefferson writing most of the document. This incredibly important document is surprisingly short, which is 4 different parts, and you do need to know the parts. First, you have the introduction, which states the purpose of the document. Second is an explanation of human rights, which lists the ideals and beliefs of the colonists. These include things like all men are created equal, the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those things that Mr. Horlbeck talked about before. The third section is simply a list of complaints against the king in Britain. This is actually the majority of the document, just a list. Finally, there's a call to action. This is the section where the colonists not only declare independence, but also declare war on Britain, leading to the Revolutionary War.
The American Revolution, as you know, gave birth to the United States of America. Beginning in 1775, Miss Harlob thought it actually was in Connecticut, but in fact it was actually in Massachusetts at Lexington and Concord, with the shot heard around the world. No one knows who fired first, the rebellious Americans or the British. However, what we do know is that the fighting broke out for the next 8 years. The reasons for the war are much more in depth than what I will explain. However, they vary from taxation without representation, new ideas for a better and improved government, and the Boston Massacre. Many of the colonists were tired of paying taxes for a government in which they had no say in, for as you know, decisions made in Britain were being made without the consent of the colonist. So how would you feel if I told you I'm going to need you and your parents to pay extra taxes on your bills that will be used to help Canada? I know, I understand. From here, the idea of the revolt began to take form, and our founding fathers began to create a more perfect government that created the idea of a republic democracy, rather than Britain's rule by king and parliament. Lastly, the tipping point was the Boston Massacre, where colonists were fired upon by British troops. News of the massacre spread like wildfire, leading up to the shot heard around the world. The rest, as they say, is history.
After the Continental Congress created the United States, one of the first orders of business was to create a new government system, and thus the Articles of Confederation were born. Adopted in 1777, the Articles were essentially a direct reaction to our prior English rule. We were so afraid of creating another central government that could become too powerful like a king that we actually gave all the power in the government to the states. Under the Articles, each state became like a mini country that was part of a larger union. Each state could raise their own army, make their own taxes, and even print their own different kinds of money. As for the central U.S. government, it really didn't have much power at this point. It couldn't even tax and raise enough money to pay the members of the legislature. It needed the states' help. Now, all was good and well with this system while we fought the British because we had a common goal. But once we defeated the Redcoats, there was not really a reason for us to work together anymore, and instead every state started to work on what was best for them. Naturally, this created problems between the states, and before we knew it, this fledgling country that defeated a world superpower was on the verge of defeating itself. Thus, once again, a Continental Congress was called, and representatives from around the country came to talk it out and hug it out. But this time there was some magic a-brewing.
So, hugging it out? 1787. Instead of fixing an unfixable Articles of Confederation, the Founding Fathers just made a new one. They overthrew the U.S. government without a real war, just a lot of arguing. The U.S. Constitution was made to fix the problems and to prevent future issues. Written primarily by James Madison, the Constitution is known as the supreme law of the land. This means that all other laws in America must align with the principles within the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution set up the U.S. government, creating 3 branches and assigning each their own powers. It also created a system of checks and balances between these branches. This is a lasting document because it's written to be elastic or adjust with the times. Today we see this as a great document, but in 1787 there were some misgivings.
As you know, the U.S. government's first attempt at creating the law of the land was the Articles of Confederation. However, as you know, a few weaknesses were recognized, and thus the Bill of Rights was implemented in order to correct those weaknesses from the Articles. The Bill of Rights is our first 10 amendments in the U.S. Constitution. The Bill of Rights was a game changer in the world and were relied upon to protect the average citizen from the national government growing too big. Go ahead, name a few of the first 10 amendments, and I'll wait for you. Okay, now you know how important what I'm about to say is. You should know all 10. But the ones that get the most attention today are the First Amendment, which is the freedom of speech, religion, and press. The Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. The Fourth, unreasonable search and seizures. Good to know when you are 16 and get pulled over. A cop can't search your vehicle without probable cause. They can't just pull you over for having an awesome native sticker. I'm looking at you people. Okay, for all those that are out there shredding the nar-nar. Okay, the Eighth Amendment, though, cruel or unusual punishment, meaning once you go to jail, the cops can't torture you to get you to admit to speeding. Now, this is not all of them. It is imperative to know that the Bill of Rights grants American citizens protection. This was revolutionary in the world at the time, and still today in some parts of the world is. I'm looking at you, Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, Iran, India, Democratic Congo, South Africa, Chad, Somalia. You get the idea. So the next time you complain about homework, be thankful you can voice that opinion without being taken out back and tortured.